Hello, folks. Thanks for joining me for another installment of the Interwar years. How exciting. The last lecture we talked about Stalinist Russia, and it was so very fun for everybody, especially all of those rich peasants called kulaks who went to the gulags, which are the work camps where they died slowly of overwork and starvation. Oh, and disease. I forgot about that. I am starting my timer, and I'm giving you... We're back on this slide because there were a couple of pictures, and so I wanted to go through the pictures. So, first off, we have... to click on the PowerPoint. This is a delightful piece of propaganda where Russia is comparing itself to the United States and other capitalist countries, and so you can see how they're faring so badly. It's overcast and it's sad, and also, dude, that capitalist guy is like not a handsome fella. And then over there on the like happy communist side, the sun is shining. What a handsome guy. Everybody's working and their production and economy is just booming. Yeah. But again, propaganda. Here is a cute little painting called "The First Tractor Arrives" to talk about industrialization even in the countryside. Here is a sort of commemorative plaque, stamp, something like that, of celebrating 50 years of industrializing the USSR. I believe this was manufactured in like 77 or something like that. Okay, so now we are going to talk about Italy, Germany, and Japan and their responses to World War I and the Great Depression. So there are lots of challenges coming to capitalism from communism, but there are also other challenges that are turning into bigger challenges because Russia is not rising up and picking fights with other people, okay? It's the fascists who are doing that. They're intensely nationalistic, territorially aggressive, ferociously anti-communist, Germany, Italy, and Japan. And we get into the Axis powers. So here's a little look. Germany, Italy, Japan. Except not in that order. So first off, let's talk about some of the new isms that we've got going on and what they actually are and what they actually mean. So fascism is when you have an authoritarian leadership devoted to nationalism rather than to capitalism or socialism, because Nazism actually stands for National Socialist Organization. So Nazism is actually technically a variety of socialism. The only specific thing about National Socialism or Nazism that it's really focused on German nationalism, and with that sort of extra other people sort of thrown in there. So fascism doesn't necessarily have to use capitalism to get its point across to make its economy go round. It can use socialism, it could use communism if it wanted to. It's the nationalism aspect that makes fascism different from all of the other ones. So is Stalinist Russia fascist? Not really, because it's not quite so much about the nation, it's more about communism, or otherwise we wouldn't have all of these different USSRs, and they wouldn't want to call themselves USSR, they'd want to call themselves Russia instead. So, again, Nazism is fascism plus German nationalism and hatred of other people. Totalitarianism is where we have absolute direct rule of everybody. There aren't any party politics. The government controls capital and directs economic reform. So it is called totalitarianism because it is controlling the totality of the country or whatever you have. A lot of these were in reaction to the Great Depression. They were trying to establish imperial territorial control as well over the places that they had lost, and to make up for the fact that they had lost so many states in World War I. For example, Germany lost all of its holdings in Africa. Italy is going to go over and, take some places in Africa. They also identify and speak against those who they believe represents the biggest threat. So in Germany, the scapegoat is identified as Jewish people. Italy identifies the whole rest of Europe as the scapegoat and the problem and the biggest threat. And the USSR identifies those bourgeoisie pig dogs who are anti-worker. Okay, Nazis. So fascism. Fascism is a concept that is intensely nationalistic and rewards action over reflection. Hence why fascism is really seen as being quite aggressive. Fascism is not about sitting and thinking about it and, reflecting what's the best way we could do this, what's a diplomatic solution. Fascism is beat the door down and punch them in the face to get them to do what you want, kind of a thing. I have a sneeze. It's coming. Just to warn you. I'm going to take off my headphones. Ouch. Oh, sorry. Again, it's not the Rona. It's just there's many pollens in the air. Fascism also is not really about what it's for as much as it's about what it's against. So fascism is against individualism. I'm an individual. They don't want you to be an individual, because then you're thinking for yourself. You are challenging the government and what the government is telling you to believe and do. And also, you can't have national unity if you have people seeing themselves more as an individual than as sort of like a cog in the great machine of your country. They're also against liberalism, because liberalism tends to promote thinking and challenging stuff and individualism rather than unity. And they're also against feminism. So this is the female sign, not just a stick person, though we could make it a lady. Hey! They're against feminism because, again, they see feminism as creating conflict, creating arbitrary and unnecessary divisions. It takes away from unity, because now people are arguing about this. They're also against parliamentary democracy because it's too much time and red tape, and it takes away from action. Fascism is very much about the action. So likewise, in fascism, you are very much rewarded for actions of heroism. And how do you become a hero with lots of actions of heroism? War. Because you can't be aggressive against your countrymen. That doesn't work with fascism. So you either have to do wartime stuff, or you pick the scapegoats. Because you cannot, as a fascist country, you cannot be building up this idea of you have to do acts of heroism, you have to be aggressive, you have to go out and do actions, and then have no opportunities for those actions to be done. It's like winding everybody up and then they have nowhere to run. Have you ever done that where you feed a toddler sugar right before bed? That's a bad idea. If you're going to feed a toddler sugar, you should at least have a backyard and time to let them wander around and, run themselves into the ground with their energy in small, tiny little circles. You do not feed a toddler sugar and then try to put them to bed. Likewise, you don't build up. You need to do actions, you need to be a hero, you need to go out and be aggressive, and then give them nowhere to be aggressive. That's when people turn in on themselves and start to tear each other down from the inside out. You have to have that outside person to target. And obviously they're anti-communism, because communism is not focused on the nation, it's focused on the worker. They also, usually, most fascists are determined to overthrow existing regimes, but this is mostly because existing regimes tended to be parliamentary democracies, and they don't like that. They tended also to be conservative and reactionary while celebrating traditional values. So these are the guys you're going to be talking to who are like, yeah, let's go back to the glory days. Let's make it how it used to be. And in fact, Nazi Germany invents sort of their own history for themselves, calling themselves the Third Reich. The reason they want to call that is they're recalling previous glory days of Germany. So when they're talking about the different Reichs, the First Reich is the Holy Roman Empire, and then the Second Reich is, and Reich just means age, like era, and then the Second Reich is the Weimar Republic, and the Nazis are like, no, we're going to go back to more what we had here, return to traditional values, really celebrate what it means to be German. But again, fascism is not limited to Germany. Fascism is just a general idea. So could you have a fascist America? Of course you could. Of course you could, because fascism is just a generic idea, an ideology. So what causes fascism? Well, I mean, obviously people sitting around and thinking, what would be great fascism? But like, what allows fascism to take hold? First off, everything is wrecked from World War I in Germany and Italy. World War I, Europe is a mess. They have no money. And that also means they can't rebuild. Then the Great Depression hits. Great sadness. The Great Depression, those are my little teardrops. They're sad. It's depression. Sadness. Whatever. And the Great Depression leads to a lot of unemployment, and therefore people are really poor and economies are stagnating, and that's always bad. So there's a lot of anxiety and worry. People don't want to be anxious. Anxiety is not something that people really look forward to and are like, gee, it'd be fun today, being anxious. People like to be stable, healthy, and happy. And fascism allows you to be stable, happy, and healthy because it unifies everybody. It promotes, traditional values that you all enjoy. The problem is it comes at huge costs, like needing to blame scapegoats and aggressive acts of war. A lot of soldiers from World War I as well, a lot of soldiers and veterans had no social safety nets. There's lots of examples of, German soldiers who had fought in World War I, sacrificed huge things, and are just out on the street suffering, homeless veterans kind of a thing. Small-scale businessmen, this one is important for Italy. Small-scale businessmen, farmers, and artisans are worrying either about corporations that are going to swallow them up in extra capitalism, or sort of more of the socialism, communism side where everybody gets swallowed up by the state, and while it might be more beneficial to your average factory worker, it's not going to be for farmers who don't want to be collectivized into giant farms. And of course, intellectuals disillusioned with modern life. Plus, the Russian Revolution doesn't help. What's going on with communism? So, fascist Italy. Mussolini. Italy had unified in 1870, but they had yet to develop a really modern or democratic culture by the time World War I rolls around and they're completely devastated. I mean, if you think about it, 1870 to 1914, 44 years. So imagine if you were born when Italy became a country, you would be a middle-aged person, and not even an older middle-aged person. It's not like you're 50, you're in your early 40s, technically. So if you are in your early 40s, you haven't had really enough time to understand and to grasp and to build those foundations and traditions on traditional government, the way somebody of an older generation might be. In Italy as well, conservative landlords control most of the rural areas. And in the north, there's an industrial society arising. Then we have tension between the working class and the middle class. So Italy is partially that they don't have democratic traditions. Because before this, Italy was just a bunch of principalities. And those principalities were being ruled by essentially teeny monarchs, more or less. The last democratic tradition that they had in Italy was the Romans, for God's sakes. Then we also have no democratic traditions. We have some class warfare and class tensions going on. Veterans don't think that they themselves were being treated fairly, or that Italy was treated fairly at the Treaty of Versailles. To be fair, they switched sides and then were neutral, so. And then also the Great Depression makes everything worse. So there's resentment and anxiety. The other big thing that fascism loves is a charismatic leader. Here comes Mussolini. Mussolini was an Italian leader, and he wanted to take strong leadership, and the Italians were like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah. Are you going to help us? Yeah, okay. And by the time a lot of the Italians realized it was not a good direction to go in, it was kind of sort of too late. But that's how fascism works as well. Fascism is all like pretty and happy and nice until it's not. And then when it's not, it's full of murder and sadness. So, tends to be if you're on the wrong side. So a lot of people end up getting disillusioned with things like fascism because of that. A lot of their friends and things don't fit into those categories. So Mussolini takes over in 1922 with a group of thugs, essentially, who are known as the Black Shirts. And this is his own particular version of the SS or the KGB. Not quite the KGB, because these guys aren't secrets. These guys are just out and about in the streets, taking over. Black Shirts. And big business supports him because they're afraid of communism. So he has this aggressive fascist, essentially like Gestapo police force. And then he combines it with rich folk. Big business. For different reasons. But those two things are pretty powerful. That's how you take over countries. And guess what Mussolini did? Take over countries. We'll talk more about Mussolini and Nazi Germany in our next lecture. This one will probably end up getting to 6 lectures instead of 5. Probably just because I've been trying to keep it closer to 15 minutes than 20. So the last lecture is likely to be very short. Anyhow, have a nice day. See you later.